Hey, pro organizers, it's Melissa, and I am coming to you on a Monday morning. I am fully caffeinated, well rested, and ready to go into the month of April, and I hope you are too. April is going to be a crazy month for us here at Pro Organizer Studio. We are revamping all of our programs. We are revamping branding. We are doing all of the things. By the way, when I say we, it's me. I am it. So I am doing all these things because I am a solopreneur, as many of you are. So anyway, shout out to all of us who are running our businesses, doing all the things, and getting lots of great things out there. So just remember, I am here for you. I understand the solopreneur life. Anyway, I wanted to bring you a special podcast today. A few weeks ago, I had my good friend and fellow Twin Cities organizer, Missi McKown, on with me. We talked about ADHD, we talked about all sorts of things, but I kept this one back because it was a special one, and I wanted to make sure that I honored the subject. And Missi is talking about grief, and we are talking about working with clients who are going through grief, whether that is recent, very fresh grief, or whether that is long ago grief that continues to go with you. This is something that is really close to Missi personally, and she will tell you why. But we wanted to have this conversation because as an organizer, you might be working with someone who is going through the grief process. And sometimes it's hard to know what to do. We wanted to give you some concrete things that you could do with clients to help them. One of the things that I do want to say at the beginning of this, we recorded this before Missi and I were on a radio show together. And after we recorded that session on Minnesota Public Radio a few weeks ago, there was someone who was in the NPR offices, and she asked to talk to us afterward. And this person talked to us for a long time about her own grief and about what she had been through losing a partner. And it's just a reminder that we as organizers do such important work with people. It's not just about getting the stuff out of the house. It's really about working with people through some of the hardest times of their life. And the openness that we can have as organizers can really help people process their grief. While we are not licensed therapists in any way, we all know that we operate as therapists quite frequently in our business. And so we just wanted to have a conversation about this. I think it's an important one. And I hope that it helps you the next time you work with a client who is working through some difficult things. I am excited to start this wonderful new month of April, and I hope you are too. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, hit me up at hello@proorganizerstudio.com. Here is my friend, Missi McKown of Clear Spaces Organizing. You have had very personal experiences with grief, and I have recently had some friends that have been going through very difficult times with grief, and it is really hard because you probably don't know how to feel. They don't know how to feel. They're a tremendous amount of emotion. So can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. A lot of people I love have died. I
Yeah.
guess that's the best way to start it. The first big loss in my life was my grandma, and I was only 21, so I expected her to live a bit longer, but she also had cancer and had been given 4 months to live and had already lived, I don't know, another 10 years past that. It was a long time, and all of the time with grandma felt special and extra. But we were extremely close. If you have ever been to my house around Christmas time, you will see a Wheel of Fortune ornament on the tree. That is in honor of Grandma Jo. She gave it to me when she was still alive, obviously. That'd be weird. And it was just a show that she would watch all the time, and we would watch it together. And if we were apart, we would watch it in our own separate houses and call each other and make our guesses over the
Oh, I
phone
love that.
about the puzzles. Yeah, and when my parents were going through a divorce, I just spent a lot of time at grandma's house. I was a teenager then, and it was just, I don't know, we got really close. So losing her at 21 felt, it was extremely significant. And then my uncle, my grandma's son, Uncle TJ, he was just a permanent bachelor. And because of that, he was just always available to the nieces and nephews. And after grandma passed away, he carried on the tradition of Sunday night dinners, and we would keep meeting at his house. And the whole family was super close. There just weren't that many of us. And so when Uncle TJ passed away in 2014, that was another just big loss. He was kind of like a surrogate dad in my life, a really stable male presence, and just a really good, tender-hearted guy. And the next loss, this one was the hardest. It's my brother, and he passed away in 2015. And it was just my brother and I growing up.
Mhm.
So I did get some step siblings along the way. And in a way, after his loss, I felt a lot like an only child because between my mom and my dad, I'm the only kid left from that relationship. And that has been strange and something I'm still unpacking in therapy.
Right.
But thinking about it even this morning when I was driving around, I feel like we have this tendency to make people who have passed away better in our mind than they were. It's almost like we don't see their flaws anymore
Yep.
because the absence that their of their presence is so strong that we just remember all the good things. And I don't actually think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's okay to remember people at their best. And because that's what you're missing, I'm not looking back fondly at fights we had when we were kids. It's
Sure.
just, missing his presence and even his presence now that, we both would have been into our 40s now, and it would have been cool to just see what our relationship looked like then. He passed away at 33, and gosh, I don't think that I have ever been so devastated in my life.
It lasts a long time too. I think that's the other
Yeah.
thing is grief is not something that there's a timeline on where you just say, "Well, it's a year and then things are better." And I'm
Oh,
sure that
no.
there are times like, you texted me that it was a celebration of life and, and you'll be doing that for, decades more, right? Like you still remember that person. And I read something once when a friend was going through a very hard time and I thought this was a really great description. They said, you have a box and there's a button that grief is. And at first there's a ball in the box and it's huge and that ball is constantly touching the button. Like it's just relentless. And then eventually the ball starts to get smaller, but it starts to ping around the box. And so it'll hit the grief button at
Randomly.
times you don't expect it.
Yeah.
And then it'll still be there, and the ball might be the teeniest, tiniest little ball, but it'll still hit that button every once in a
Mhm.
while. I just thought that was a beautiful description for people that haven't been through as much, just to say you have no idea when it is gonna hit you, and that it's gonna be hard for a really long time, even just the what ifs and the what
Yeah.
would it be like? So,
Right. Right. Yeah, and what you're talking about is his birthday. Yeah, we do a
yeah,
celebration every year on his birthday, and it was recent. Yeah, and that's fun, and that's kind of evolved over the years. I was just talking with a client about it this week, actually, because her mom passed away in the fall, and now I'm working with her dad, and then she's there to kind of help kind of have be a the last chance. Her and her sister are looking at things before they go out the door to make sure that before stuff gets donated, if there's anything that they're interested in, that they can pluck it out of the pile and keep it. And they have a keep it for right now pile too. Cause I'm just like, there's no rush on any of this. We can take our time with it. And um yeah, it's just a beautiful gift to be invited into people's lives, when they are experiencing grief, and the grief, to your point, can feel completely fresh, even if it's been a decade or more. And it takes different people, different lengths of time to be ready to invite someone into their space. I have worked with some folks as soon as 5 months after their partner has passed away, and I was just blown away that they were ready. I've worked with some folks where it's been years, especially, items from parents who have passed away that they've been hanging on to. And oh my gosh, I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. Do you remember the TV show Clean Sweep with Peter
yes,
Walsh and TLC? Okay. Part of my story of how I started organizing. Yours is Marie Kondo, mine is Peter Walsh.
yep,
And she had remembered this episode where there was this green vacuum that the siblings were like, "Well, we can't get rid of the green vacuum because we have so many memories of mom using it." And she said that Peter Walsh told them, "Your mom is not this vacuum, but if this vacuum holds that much memory, what if we took a picture of it and we framed it and you could hang it in your home?" And that's what they did. And it was this beautiful way of still honoring their mom and honoring this item that held so much, like, deep meaning and memories for them, but in a way that it didn't add unnecessary clutter to their life. They weren't going to use the vacuum. There's so many cool ways to honor people's stuff. I know you for your kiddos have done that with would you wanna talk about the baby shoes?
Yeah, there are some things that I'm really nostalgic about, and for some reason, baby shoes is one of them, and so I turn them into Christmas ornaments because I was
Mhm,
like, I don't wanna get rid of these things, but it doesn't make sense. You're not just gonna keep them in a box, and that is one of the things. So when you're talking about the picture of the vacuum, I
mhm,
work really hard with my clients to try to honor. That's one of the biggest things I got from Marie Kondo. I understand a lot of people are not Marie fans. I get it. But there are some really beautiful things in the method. And one of them, the biggest things that I learned was find a way to honor the things that you say are really important to you.
mhm,
Because if I would have just taken my kids' baby shoes and just said, I can't possibly part with these, but then I put them inside a box that's under another box, behind another box that's gathering dust in my storage room,
mhm.
I'm not honoring those. I like trying to do something good with those things. It's not to say that
Yeah,
there aren't items that you just say, "I have to keep this because I'm not ready to part with it." That's totally normal, but
mhm,
finding creative ways to help your clients take some of those sentimental things and turn them into something beautiful that they can remember that person, I try to do a lot.
mhm.
So,
Me too, and if it's a person that celebrates Christmas and does a tree, there's so many cool things you can do with
so
it.
many. Yes.
Yeah, I have flowers from the funeral service for my grandma, for my uncle TJ, and for my brother that are the first 3 things on the tree every year.
Yeah.
And I usually forget about it until I open up the, Christmas bin and they're sitting there at the top, and then I'm like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that's right."
Yeah. Yeah, you need to have a moment. So
Yeah, usually I do. Yeah, I don't know, there's something special about being invited into such a sacred space where you're getting to touch and honor someone's things that they've left behind. And yeah, to your point, that honoring it and finding a good spot for it, if it's something that they want to keep, just holding space for those conversations and holding space for the emotions too. And I know not every organizer is for this. I mean, there's some that, if you have a crying client, they don't really know what to do. But if you are working with someone in grief, be prepared because it will happen. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able to give people space to feel their emotions, and you can do what feels right to you. For some folks, it might just be backing away and giving them space. Some people really like to grieve in private, or they'll remove themselves from the room and just let them do what they need to do.
you can
Uh,
also ask. You can also sometimes it's awkward if you don't know what to do, and so then you're, like, taking a guess, and then it's also okay to just say, "Would you like to be alone for a little bit, or would you like me to sit next to you and just help you?" You can ask that
just
person, and then they can decide.
Yep.
That concept of holding space, sometimes people just need to know that someone's beside them and that is the time I think that you need to be maximally flexible. We've talked a little bit about flexibility, but when
Mhm,
you're working with someone who is in grief, whether it's new grief or, aged grief, which is still
mhm,
very important, you've got to you said earlier, read the room. You've got to really read the room harder than you do with any other client because you don't wanna push them to make difficult decisions that they're not ready for. That's the one time that I think in organizing, you have to know the time when it's right to push your client because you have the clients that are just avoiding the decision entirely. When you're
mhm.
working with someone in grief, it's a very different thing, and you have to be really careful.
Yep. I That's 100% true because also, especially if it's fresh grief, I kept checking in with my client, when it's fresh grief. I'm like, "Are you sure you're ready? I'm
Yeah,
I'm just nervous that you're gonna come home. I will have cleared out all of your partner's clothing from the closet, and you will go and open that door and find it very empty. Are you ready for that?" And they were like, "Yes, we have talked about this extensively with the family. We're all on board." And they're like, "I need you to know that so that you feel comfortable." I was like, "Okay, I just
yeah.
thank you. I thank you for catching me up to speed because the last thing I wanna do is for somebody who's already in fresh grief, push them over the edge and all of a sudden they realize I wasn't ready, and I've
Yeah.
already taken the clothes to the
Yeah,
donation
the
center."
clothes are already gone, and then they're
Yeah,
like, "Oops, I made a mistake," and
yeah.
that's a super important thing to ask and make sure they're really ready. I will tell you too, I have worked with people I can think of 2 people specifically. One woman, her mother passed away over a decade before, and she just said very upfront, she goes, "This is the first time I've ever been able to consider even going through these things, and I'm really ready now." But I still checked with her. I was like, "I wanna make sure if at any
Mhm,
point in this process you feel like I made a mistake, I can't do it. It doesn't matter that it's been a decade. If it's too much, we're not gonna do it." And then there was another woman, this actually made me really sad. she had not been able to let a single thing of her mom's go, so she brought her mom's entire home to her house, and
Mm,
subsequently, I mean, she could barely live in her house because she had
right.
2 houses worth of stuff, and there
Mhm.
was one thing in particular, I was being very gentle with her because this was very hard for her, and it had been many years, and I said, "Okay, well, what about this?" It was a washcloth, and she goes,
Mhm.
"Absolutely not, that was my mom's washcloth, I can't possibly think about parting with it," and I just remember I only went there once. I think it was too much for her, right? And you just realize it makes you sad that some people are not going to be able to get out from underneath it
Mm.
for a
That's
very long
me.
time,
Yeah.
and we don't understand it, but it's so personal to them.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think that's why it's important to have the keep for right now section when you're
Yeah,
organizing for people in grief, because when they're not sure, they're truly not sure. So
yeah,
yeah, to your point, there's no sense in pushing. I just always err on the side of caution anyway. So I'm like, okay, sounds great, let's keep it. And then we just decide where we're going to keep it. And if they're open to it, when would you like to revisit it again? But for some folks, that's not necessary. If they have the space in the storage room, like it can just sit there until they're ready.
yeah. What are some of the things that you find or is there any commonality of the people that are reaching out to you in terms of have they had just some sort of like a breakthrough of it's the time or
One that reached out last month said that her partner had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. And she said, "Well, I know I'm not going to stay in this house."
yeah,
Um, and she goes, "But I don't know when I'm going to move, but I know that I won't stay here forever." And she said, "But there's been one storage room and the whole rest of the house neat as a pin.
yeah.
One storage room where it was right across from the guest room. So they would lock the door when they had guests because they didn't want anyone to go in it and see
I
what it
not even accidentally, like, "Oops, the
no.
bathroom's in here."
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, don't go in there. We locked it, and I just thought that was so cute and clever, and and it was just a regular old storage room, stuff where you don't know where it goes, it just went in there. It was nothing too overwhelming, but it was overwhelming for her, which made all of the sense in the world because now she's alone, and that looking at that space that really hadn't been touched in most of the 21 years that they had lived there. So anyway, it was just an incredible opportunity to enter in and go through it, and she said to me day 1, she goes, "Just so you know, I don't wanna go through it item by item, I wanna just open a box and say, 'Let it all go.'" And I said, "I hear you, and may I share a story with you?" And she said, "Sure." And I said, "I recently worked with a client where we were going through photos, and she told us, I don't think you need to go through the photos, but we were just getting all of the photos together. We were separating the photos from the paperwork, just even from an acids point of view to keep, everything from discoloring earlier than it should." And I said, "At the bottom of this box of photos was a very small box. And it looked like it was something incredibly sentimental. There was some cursive handwriting in there and a very tiny bracelet. And we found out when we gave it back to the client that her mom had passed away suddenly when she was only 21, I think.
Mhm.
And it was a bracelet from when she was on her first birthday that her mom had put on her and wrote a little note to her on her very first birthday. And she hadn't seen that bracelet in literally decades. And
Aw.
she was blown away. She's like, "Missy, I had no idea where this was. I didn't even know if it still existed. I would have never, ever looked in that box." And she's like, "This is more precious to me than anything else that you did today. Even what you did is incredible." She's like, "I love that I can walk in my storage room now."
Yeah, right.
But this means so much. And so she got to go on a FaceTime call with her sister in a different state that night and look at it together, read it together, laugh together, cry together, share stories about their mom. And she followed up with me to tell me that because she still was just so in love with this gift that we had found. So I shared that story with the client, and she goes, "You don't think that I should just open a box and say it should all go?" I said, "I really don't." I said, "I would feel absolutely horrible if there was something somewhere that was meaningful and later you were wondering, 'Gosh, whatever happened to that thing? I wonder where it went.'" And she goes, "Okay, I'll let you go through every item." I said, I can sort it, and I can do that pretty quickly, but I do want you to have a clear yes or no on what stays or what goes." And she also tried to speed up the process too, and I slowed her down again. And she's, "I want it all done in one day." And I said, "I could bring in the team and we could get it all done in one day, but man, would you feel overwhelmed at the end of the day. That would be so many decisions for one day." And she goes, "You think I should do two?" I said, "I think you should do two, with less people here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
And
maybe a week apart or yeah,
yeah,
it's
we
just
did. We did them a week apart. I said that we should not do it back to back.
no.
We did it one full week apart.
No.
And I love that you thought that. Yep. And it was beautiful. She had such treasures in there. She got to tell us story after story of her partner and the adventures that they went on. She had even made like our little adventure book all up. And I mean, just it was a beautiful time, and she was like, "I can't believe how much fun this was." She's like, "I didn't expect to share stories about, our life together and our marriage." And she's like, "But that just made the whole experience even better." I'm wondering if it would be helpful just to have that in mind when working, especially with widows or widowers, just to create some space for them to share stories. Because as someone who has lost someone, I know that I love it when someone asks me about my brother by name, or they'll say, "Do you remember when Justin did this?" And I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that was ridiculous." Or because he was a very funny guy, right? And so there's always some goofy story or a joke he did or a prank or, whatever. There's so many of those out there floating around with his friends and family. And once your person is gone, the only thing you have left are stories.
Yeah.
And if you don't get the opportunity to share it or people make you feel like they don't want to hear it, it's such a gift when someone says, "Well, tell me about your partner," or "Tell me about how you met." Or, there's so many opportunities to connect there. And again, I have to go back to you got to read the room. Some people are not ready and they may not want to. But if you've done the consult and everything, you've probably gotten a feel for what kind of person you're working with. And when you do get someone who wants to share, it can just be a really beautiful point of connection.
I totally agree with you, especially it's actually a great way, I think, to get people who are having a harder time going through the things. If they can sometimes talk about it, if you're like, "Hey, tell me about, tell me about this XYZ thing." Or especially if it's sentimental items. "Oh, I see your mom graduated from high school in 1930. That must have been, I have a client that I saw his mom's yearbook and I'm like, "Tell me all about it." And I was reading all
Yeah.
the inscriptions and people love not everybody, but most people that are working through these things want to tell those stories, and it
Yeah.
actually makes the process I would argue it makes it faster, not slower. Because
Mhm.
if you let them work through some of those stories, it makes them more comfortable
For
of
sure.
like, "I can do this."
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree with that. And it's more fun for you too. I mean,
Totally.
you get to connect to the person whose stuff that you're sorting through and um yeah, this just goes back to me mentioning earlier. Yeah, I'm a naturally curious person. I want to
Yeah.
know. I
Oh,
want to
I
know
love
the
people. I
stories.
mean, I consider our job to be archaeology a little bit.
Yeah,
You're uncovering all the layers of family or a person or whatever. And
right.
again, this may not be your jam, in which case, please call Missy or me. We'll totally take care of it for you. But I do think if this is something that you're attached to, I think sometimes people, especially maybe newer organizers, think, "Oh, I have to keep it professional and I shouldn't ask this question." And whatever. No, they're especially when you're dealing with people that are going through sentimental items, really asking those questions, I think it makes it a really it makes the process better for them, and it really shows that you care, which we
Yeah,
do.
absolutely.
What do you think you do differently because of your personal experiences?
Real gentle. I don't know that change though. Let's see. It's a great question. What do I do differently because Justin has gone? Yeah, it probably is asking more questions and letting people share stories because I know what a gift it is to me when people still remember. Oh, yeah, no, I have a story about this. So I was working with a client who was unable to go downstairs, but needed us to declutter some items downstairs. So while we were down there, I came across what is it called? Needlepoint
Oh, yeah.
stitch. Yeah, of their wedding date, and it was coming up. And so I quick put a little memo in my calendar to remember and took a picture of it. And so on my client's anniversary date and her partner was gone, and this was how we connected. I mean, there's a little blurb about grief on my website, but you kind of have to do an archaeological dig to find it on the about page. It's like an Easter egg. But when people find it and they have grief that they've been experiencing too. That's a really great connection point, and I'm very comfortable talking about the loss of my brother and death in general and all sorts of fun stuff. We had connected and had the world's longest consultation because of that. And so I told her all about my brother. She told me all about her husband. And we felt like we knew each other's person by the time that we were leaving. And when it was her anniversary, I texted her that photo and I said, "Hey, I found this when I was downstairs, a month ago. And just wanted to let you know I'm thinking of you today."
Oh,
And she was like blown away and so grateful because I think as when you have lost someone, I think the biggest fear, or at least it has been for me, is that other people are going to forget about my person too.
yeah.
And so when somebody shows up and shows that they remember, it was my brother's birthday recently, and I had still a few friends, even it's been 9 years now since he passed away, and still a few friends texted to be like, "Hey, I'm thinking about Justin today. I just
Yeah.
wanted to let you know, thinking about you and your family." And it means so much because he's not here. And so for other people to remember when he was and the gift that his presence was in the world, it means so much. Any kind of touch point for your client to show that you can remember and acknowledge their person, I will just say that goes a long way.
And even if you don't get the exact day right,
No.
an
Yeah.
approximate day, especially if it's around a holiday. I have a friend who lost her mom right around Christmas, so Christmas is
Mhm.
very hard, and so even
Yeah.
if it's just around that time and just say, "Hey, I'm thinking about you," that person is more than likely not gonna be like, "Wow, they didn't get the exact day." It's just freaked
Yeah.
out, even if it's
Oh, yeah.
after.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I got some dear friends that do it like a week early, and I'm like,
Yeah,
close enough. Yeah,
yeah,
they're
right.
thinking of me and they're trying to show that they care. And I mean, they are showing that they care. And it's just, yeah, it's all beautiful and lovely. And the seasonality is so great too. You're
Yeah.
right. A client who lost two husbands over Christmas.
Oh, that makes me really sad.
Yeah. So she compensated by really decorating her little heart out.
Yeah, I
So,
would too.
yeah. Yeah.
But, this is another example of exactly what we were talking about with Sarah, and she even, had grief as one of her examples, but if this is something that you have unfortunately developed a specialty in, and I wish that weren't the case, I wish that you had all of your people, but, if you have something that you are like, "I have been through this, and so I understand it," whatever that looks like for you, just if you are comfortable talking about it, like you have a little blurb on your website, if you are comfortable talking about it, put that there because it's just gonna be another sign for people that like you get me and you feel me to the extent that that feels good for you to do.
Right. Right. Because there are people that are, especially with all the different organizers out there right now, they're looking to see if they can connect with you online.
Yeah,
Can they read something that makes them go, "Oh yeah, that's the person I want to work with."
totally.
And so if you've got anything, if it's, I don't know, Sarah made a long list. Go back and watch the
Yeah,
podcast with
go
Sarah.
go wa go watch Sarah's
Link
episode.
it in the show notes, will ya?
I will, I will. The other thing that I'm gonna say, I know I've already talked about Marie once on this podcast, so just go with me again, but and
I'm
Marie's
not
a I
bothered
know,
by it.
you're not, but other people don't. There's some organizers that aren't a fan of Marie, but anyway, I love her, and her first show that came out in 2019, there is an episode, her name is Margie, and they end up calling her Con Margie at the end, which is really
Oh,
funny.
cute.
Con Margie, I can't remember how you pronounce it, but her episode is all about grief. She had lost her husband, and in the first part of the episode, just go and watch it, it's really good, but she was not at all she was like, "We're not touching his things. They will not be a part of this process." And through the process, as they started going through it, she realized she was ready. And so
Mm.
then it's showing her working through his things. It's just a very beautiful episode, and I highly recommend if you are thinking about this as a subject, we should probably find the old Peter Walsh one if that is out there on the internet somewhere, but really just thinking about some of the TV shows that you can watch that deal with this too, that give you some ideas. I think it's always easy to watch a TV show and get ideas.
True.
We're gonna make you read some books, and then we're gonna make you watch some TV on Grease. So,
Yeah. Everybody's got assigned reading and
yeah.
watching.
Tell me your favorite thing about your brother.
Oh, gal. He could really work a room.
Okay.
He could just have people eating out of the palm of his hand. He was very funny and witty, quick-witted. He loved, vocabulary words, so any kind of thing that he could turn into a pun, he was a big fan of, and they were clever. You had to, listen carefully for them or be like, "I see what you did there." Um, he was just goofy and lighthearted. My sister-in-law and I postmortem diagnosed him with ADHD,
Oh,
and
of
it
course.
just yeah, the life of the party. I mean, all of that is true, and he also just cared so deeply about his family. And I didn't see too much of that until he got sick. And he wrote a lot as he was fighting cancer in his Caring Bridge website. And it was really cool just as a sister to read the thoughts that were going on inside of his head. And my dad had something really cool to say about it. He said, when people get squeezed, you kind of see what they're made out of. And he said, Justin just kind of emanated goodness at the end and a tenderness, and some of that may have been, the possibility of facing death, I'm sure would cause one to reflect. Um, but he was this stubborn fighter, funny. I mean, just yeah, I was teasing with my sister-in-law because I said, I know it's February, and February is the month my brother was born. I said, so I kind of just see Justin everywhere. And she goes, do you see the world through Justin colored lenses? I was like, I do. In February, I do. And yeah, we were watching my niece's swim meet, and she's, in between meets, they're freezing, and it's like a sauna in there for all
It's
of us
so hot.
watching. Yeah.
Ugh, so hot.
Right. And even if you come in layers and you're stripped down to as little as possible, but it's always in winter in Minnesota, so it's a thing. But anyway, but his my niece's daughter is got like this swim cap on, and then in between laps or races or whatever they're called, meets, I don't know. Anyway, in between when she's swimming, she's got this giant jacket on, so all you can see is her face. And I said, her face is still the same. Like, you remember when she was just 2 years old, and she looked just like the spitting image of my brother. And my sister-in-law was so bugged by it because she was just like, when is she gonna look like me? Like, right now, she just looks like Justin in a dress.
Yeah.
And I and so I said, it might just be February, but it really just looks like his face." She goes, "No, it is." And it was just really sweet. And then she had a moment that she shared that a couple days later where she had another kind of Justin colored lenses moment. And I don't know, it's just grief is like beautiful because you get to remember your person.
Yeah.
And it's also like the worst because it's reminding you that your person isn't here. And yeah, that part's tough.
Well, we appreciate you sharing, and I think it's really a gift that because I know this is hard to talk about. So I really appreciate that you were willing to talk about it with us and help us be better with our clients because we've used the word gift several times, but it is a gift to be able to sit with someone and help them work through possibly the hardest part of the grieving process, which is the physical things, because there's so much emotion tied up in the physical things of, like you said about the vacuum. Well, if we say goodbye to this vacuum, like mom is not in it, you know that emotionally,
Worse.
but you know, or you know it logically,
I
but
knew
you
what you
don't
meant.
know it. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't know it emotionally, and so
Yeah.
those things are very hard. And so I think that is really to have someone ask you to help with that, just treating
Mhm.
them with the most tenderness possible, and then also if they're not acting that concerned about it, just make sure that you're being really careful that it's not going to be a delayed, like you said. There's grief everywhere. People process it very differently, but it's a gift to be able to help people through that process.
Yeah, and I loved what you said too about checking in with the person if they do start having some tears while you're working together, on the side of letting people have their own space. And then when they come back, be like, you know, "That there was a moment there. Do you want to be alone when that happens, or would you like me to sit next to you? Do you want, you know, a person with you?" And it's such a gentle way of asking that I don't think there's any possible way that could be construed as negative. So just encouragement to, yeah, just ask how to be the most supportive.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you for sharing with us. I appreciate you very much. Just like your client, I also appreciate you very much. And where can people find you in the great wide big world?
In the great wide world web, you can find Clear Spaces Organizing on Instagram as Clear Spaces Organizing. You can find me on Facebook at Clear Spaces Organizing MN for Minnesota. And the website is creating clear spaces, 3 words.com.
Love it. And one of the things that makes me a little sad, people don't realize this sometimes. If the Twin Cities is a circle,
Yeah.
Missy and I live on the exact polar opposite sides of the
Yeah.
circle. Like, we could not be farther away from each other and still be in the Twin Cities metro area. So I don't get to see her in person as much as I would like to, but I get to see her electronically a lot. And I'm very grateful that I know you. And I'm grateful that I can refer clients to you. And I'm
Yeah.
grateful that I just get to
Same.
text with you. And I'm grateful for all the things. So thank you for being my friend.
Mm. Thank you too. I really enjoy you for many reasons. Your quick wit and spunky sense of humor is one of my favorites.
Thank you. Well, not everyone enjoys it, but for the people that do, it's available 24/7.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.